law and how can one enter into it, into the domain. Okay. Yeah. So by virtue of this session, we'll try to dwell into what is a company, what are its different types, how a company is regulated by the government authorities, and what are the scope of growth of the corporate sector. Additionally, within the last leg of our session, we'll also be talking about what are the emerging corporate domains wherein an individual can excel with the given competencies and what are the career opportunities in the domain. So without a further ado, I would progress with our session. And if anybody has any questions, you can stop right then and there and ask me, or you may kindly write your questions in the chat box and we'll take them in the end of the questions. End of the session. Okay. So now we begin. Okay. There's an issue with my computer, so I'll just not keep it in the presentation mode. Okay. So by virtue of this session, there are certain learning outcomes that you can expect. A, you will be able to understand what is the basic concept of company law. You will be able to differentiate between different kinds of the company. You will be also able to decipher the legal aspect of how a company is formed. We'll also try to look into what are career opportunities in corporate law, and to give another flavor to our session so that it becomes more wholesome, we have also tried to dwell into certain skills and competencies that may help you to head start your career in the corporate domain. To begin with, okay. So when we hear the word company law or company per se, so the first question that comes to our mind is, what is a company? Okay. So company is nothing but an amalgamation of two words that are com and pax. Okay. So it was a Latin word which meant that when people came together to take food together with each other. So it is an age-old concept that evolved and became a concept now or with time, that whenever a group of people who are natural persons or artificial persons, when they come together and incorporate, within the boundaries of the law, any formation, that becomes a company. So that gives another connotation that a company can also be an artificial person that is created by law. So once when we were talking about company, we also discussed that other than natural persons, artificial persons also do come together. So their naturalization, or they are given legal authority, and because of which they are also considered as somebody who would hold certain rights and liabilities. So if we have to put it in very simple words, a company means when a group of people associate together for attainment of a common good. When they aim to achieve a certain objective. So these corporation would eventually also have certain, now that they have the legal existence, now with the legal existence, similarly as the natural person, they would also have certain rights, liabilities. They would also have certain level of power with regard to their functioning. So within the Company Act 2013, the company is also defined within the section 2 subclause 20 as, I'll read it out, a means association of a person formed or registered under either present company laws, that is Company Act 2013, or previous company laws, that were Company Act 1956, 1913, 1882, etc. So now that we've understood that company is when some certain people come together with a common objective and they try to achieve it. Now the next question that comes to our mind is, okay, how are these people coming together and how are they forming this company? So a company comes into existence as a group of people which may have some orientation. So once we were reading about the definition, we did see that there was a common objective that was associated with their formation. And then they try to explore those opportunities. The objectives could be material or money related, or with regard to management of uh, certain issue or certain ideas. So those association or those group of people will come together and form a company. Now that the company is formed, what are the stages that are particularly involved when you are forming a company? First is the promotion stage. Promotion stage is wherein you are trying to think about the objective, think about the set of people that you're trying to organize your company with. Now, once that's decided, step number 2 comes in play. That is selection of a name. Whatever company you want to establish, you would like to have its name. Like Tata had Tata Group, Reliance has Reliance. So similarly, a company would select a name for itself, and then it will incorporate it. This incorporation is the registration stage. We've had a promotion. We've thought of that we want to have a company. We've chosen a name. Now, second stage is incorporation, where we go through the standard process of registering our company. Okay. And thereafter, in the end, we will try to raise the capital to make the company go. So this brief understanding I wanted to give you to make you, give you an idea about what is a company, and how does it formation comes into play, and what are the different stages that are involved. Now, moving to the next part of our discussion, that is, what are the different nature and characteristics of a company? Okay, we've understood there is a company. There are some people who've come together. They have an objective. They've formulated a company. Now, why and what is this company going to give us? Okay, and with what objective? Even though we've had an objective to form a company and move forward, eventually, what are we getting out of it? Okay, so here we'll discuss about the different characteristics of a company. Some of them may include it holds a corporate personality. So as we've already established, that company can be natural person, also an artificial person, because it gets the power of the law. It comes within the purview of the law, because the process of its registration is done in a manner that gives us those rights and liabilities. So hence it is considered as a legal person, which also, because it's existent within the eye of law, hence it will have those powers by virtue of which it can enter into a contract, it can possess a property within its name, it can be sued, or it cannot be sued. Okay, a very landmark case has been discussed when we talk about a corporate personality. I would like to discuss here is Solomon versus Solomon case. Many of you would have read about it in your coursework, but to just give you a briefly to discuss about what really happened in this case, there was a person named Solomon, and he formulated a company along with other members of his family. Later, the company was dissolved, and everybody wanted to get their share of the money lost, and in eventuality, it was established that though Solomon had formulated the company, however, the company had its own corporate personality within the eye of law. That's why Solomon should not be held liable for any of the debts that the company has, and should be equally treated as the other shareholder when the shares are being advanced. So this is where this is a landmark judgment that had actually established that companies do have a corporate personality. Now comes the second stage. So we've understood that yes, company have legal authority, and they can enter in contract together. But what is the extent of liability that fall upon it? So in the case of company, the liabilities are such that it falls upon the company itself per se, not on the people who are associated through it. And even the people who are associated, let's say there is a company by share, and we'll read about it, what our company is by share. But to give you an understanding, whenever a company is formed and there is certain share of individual within its formulation, so if there is 100% share and there are three individuals with 30 and 40% of the share equally amongst each other, so persons have a person which holds 30% of the share, they will have the extent of liability only until when they have been invested within the firm. So that is the level of liability which falls upon or attracts when a company is formulated. Third aspect is it holds a perpetual succession. So once I say what perpetual succession, it means that the company always stays in existence. In the case of Solomon versus Solomon, what we saw, that did Solomon already, got the company in the existence. But even when Solomon would not have been, alive, or his kins have not been alive, the company would keep existing until there are people who are taking over and making it function. So its cooperation is in a manner that it will always exist until it is legally wounded up. So because law gave it existence, so law can only take away its existence. So if you have to understand this in a very crisper words. Now, another nature of a company is can hold a separate property because it has legal existence. It can always claim a property in its own name, similar as a real person can. It will also have similar level of control and ownership as a natural person would. Now, if it can buy and share property on its own, similarly, it can also transfer the shares. As an individual could buy and transfer share, similarly, the company can also do the same. And it can, amongst the different shareholders, there is no permanency. If they want to transfer their share, they can through a very standard, going through the standard company's procedure, they can transfer their shares. Next is capacity to sue or be sued. So as the company holds a legal nature, okay, so if there is any wrong that is being done in the name of the company, even though there were people behind it, okay, but if the act is done, so the company can be held liable. And if a company wishes to sue somebody, then in its own nature and its own power and will, it can also sue further. So these are the few nature and characteristics of a company. Now, we'll quickly touch upon what are the different types of a company. Okay, so primarily there are 5 categories in which a company can be formulated. All right, one is by virtue of incorporation. Incorporation is when there are companies that come together within the purview of the law, and they become incorporated. So the primary category of incorporated companies are chartered companies, statutory companies which have direct though all the companies do have implication of the law. However, these are registered by the standard procedures, and they would have their tie-in with the government as well. So this, to an extent, I would not like to confuse you by taking in different names or lingos, but this to an extent could also be a company that is registered and there is some level of public hold within its constitution. Now, the second category that comes in place is the liability-driven companies. Here, a company which has, limitation by virtue of liabilities, those companies are called limited liability firms. Companies wherein the liabilities, are unlimited, those companies are called unlimited liability firms. Next category is number of members. A company which is constituted by virtue of number of members that are within its constitution, involved within its constitution. So once there are private people, when there is certain 2 or 5 number of people come together and form a company, it's a public company. And basis when the number is higher, above 10, then it becomes a public company. Now, second is level of control. Level of control, herein there are two primary categories, holding companies and subsidiary companies. Holding companies are the one which are the primary main company. Subsidiaries are the one which are subsidiary to the primary company. Next is ownership. Herein, it has to an extent similar nature as incorporated. However, the level of ownership differs massively. Here, the ownership is either the government would have hold in it, or it would be non-governmental, which is pro bono, has some objective that it aims to reach out. All right. This brings us to the next category of our discussion. That is, okay, we've understood that there are company. Now we've understood that okay, I'll try to, okay. We've understood that there are companies, and we've understood that, how a company can be formulated. So now the next question comes to us that we've formed a company. What is that gives more significance to our company here? So here, the primary, asset of the companies are its memorandum of association, its AOA, and its prospectus. All right. So once I say the word memorandum of association, we think of, okay, what exactly is memorandum of association? So memorandum of association is nothing but a document that contains all the rules, all the processes that a company is going to eventually undertake. Okay, so it's basically a charter of a company. It would talk about what is the reason of its existence, within what domain will the company operate, who will externally regulate the company, and what are the names. So this is if I put it right, it's basically a flyer. If I talk about it, because it will give a initial understanding about what was the company formed of, who has a power over it, and what are the domain of its operation. Within the Companies Act, Section 256, it's also defined as an originally framed or as altered from time to time memorandum that is given power within the law of the land. Okay, so law of the land here being the Company Act itself. Moving to the second part, that is what exactly is within the memorandum of association. We've understood that, okay, it is a preface or maybe a flyer of our firm, but what exactly will it contain? It would contain the name clause, what is the name of the company, as we were discussing when we were talking about the formation of the company. So once we are forming a company, the first thing that we target upon or we focus upon is the MOA. Okay, wherein we provide the name clause. We mention the registered office clause. Where exactly will the company be registered? Second is the object clause. What exactly is the objective that it's eventually trying to achieve or is trying to engage in? Next is the capital. What exactly is the capital that they're investing in, or how are they targeting to, what is the forecasted value that they've aimed for or they've targeted for themselves. Next is liability clause. In case, there are certain situation that may arise within the firm, what all liabilities the company would attract. And the last is the association clause. So there is a caveat once the MOA is formed. It is that there must be at least 7 subscribers in case a public company is being formed, and minimum of 2 members if there is a private company. So there have to be people who are going to assert that yes, they have seen the content or they are well wary of what exactly has gone within the MOA. So next is article of association. Article of association, once we've understood that MOA is kind of a flyer, or if you say initial preface of what exactly is the company going to do. So next is the detailed version of the documents that the company hold. That is AOA, Articles of Association. Now, what is Article of Association? Article of Association is a printed document wherein you divide by paragraph and numbers that what exactly is the company going to do. It's mainly discusses or highlights or detail upon the internal affairs of the company. Whatever bigger or a smaller action it's going to take, all of those will be comprised of within the AOA, the Articles of Association. Now, if we think about what are the contents that AOA will be, containing, we've understood that it entails all the internal affairs information. But what is the extent of? I would really like if people would not write anything on the slides, please. It's really distracting. Thank you. So, okay. So we've understood that AOA does contain internal affairs information. Now, we would like to know that what exactly is the content or the purview within which we can entail information within the AOA. So it would talk about certain categories. I would like to enlist them. One is division of shares. Second is procedure of holding and conducting the meeting. When will the meeting, board meetings or monthly meeting or yearly meetings will be conducted? The extent of voting rights that the members would hold, the rules or the method of voting, matters that are specific to the appointment of employees or in particular the directors, remember when we were talking about the formation of the company or MOA, we did talk about that it mentions about the capital clause. So here, their MOA may mention about the bigger capital that they are targeting to invest in or they are targeting to grow with time. AOA would talk about the method exactly, how are they going to increase their capital with time. Next is rules that would be common regarding the common seal or common processes of the company. Then we go on to terms of appointment, remuneration, or delegation of authority. Who would be in power to what number of year, or or will it be age dependent? All of that details will be mentioned in AOA. Next is rule relating to issue of share. It would declare about the dividends and rule regarding the payments. It would also talk about how the company plans to secure its loan. And lastly, it would talk about what is the procedure that is involved if the company will have to eventually wind up. So it's basically talking about every small detail in which the company, will dwell into in the present or maybe in the future. So this brings us to another important document that the company holds, that is a prospectus. So now what is a prospectus? Prospectus is a document that describes or issues as inviting deposit for public or inviting offers for public for the subscription or purchase of any shares, debenture of the company. Okay. So it's basically basically an invitation to offer that is, given within the public that, okay, this is what we are targeting for, this is what we are doing. So, in case you want to come and subscribe to our shares or our debentures, you're welcome. So it's basically a certificate that is eventually issued within the case of public company when the company, is inviting out people to come and join them. And if in case, it's not advertising, it would still certify that, okay, these certain people have subscribed to the company itself. Okay. Now, what will the prospective entail? We have already understood that, okay, prospectus is existent and it would kind of advertise the nature of the company. Now, its content would actually entail what is the date of issuance of the prospectus, the name and the registered office, the consent of the central government. Prospectus, mainly if we see here, I've tried to give a landscape around public companies. So in cases of public companies, the consent of the central government, even in the case of private company, the consent is important. But here, focusing on the public company aspect, the consent of central government who's issuing. So mainly a company has to be registered within the Ministry of Corporate Affairs, has to abide by the SEBI guidelines. So all of that consent should be mentioned within the prospectus. Next is, it talks about the voting rights, number of stock exchange, punishment for any fictitious application. Then it also talks about any refund that it would give and would mention about the names and addresses of leading manager who are, showcasing the company, or maybe are the main brains behind the company. So the leading manager or the level one executive staffs, their names would also go within the prospectus. Okay. So we've understood the company is formed, we've understood the category of company, its nature and characteristics, and we've understood that, to what extent its documents should be, constituted, that a company gets its power and a visibility to grow better. Now, once a company has come into existence and has been functioning, if there are scenarios wherein something goes wrong, or uh, even though it is an artificial person within the eye of law, but even in those scenarios, if somebody who's within the part of the company and they're trying to take advantage of the company, in those scenarios there is a concept within a company law, that is lifting of a corporate veil comes into existence. So now, what is lifting up of a corporate veil? Lifting up of a corporate veil, in simple terms, is that once a curtain is separated from the company itself. So a curtain, by curtain, I mean that there are certain people who are functioning on behalf of the company, because it end of the day, it is a artificial person. And now we see that the company is not directly doing any fraudulent activities, but it is being done in the name of company. So in those scenarios, a corporate veil is being lifted up, and the people who are directly responsible, right? You see, we were discussing that within the prospectus there are leading managers' name that goes in. So if those people may be involved within any fraudulent conduct on behalf of the company, they will be held liable rather than the company itself. So this is the concept that's called lifting up of corporate veil. Now, talking about what exactly is the regulatory environment and corporate governance within the domain. Okay, so mainly we've understood that the company is formulated, what are its necessary documents, when the liability of people would also fall upon. Now, it's also important to understand that to what extent will the liabilities fall upon the company when it has done any wrong. We've understood that lifting of corporate veil is there, but we should also understand that what are the regulatory authority that play a crucial role within its functioning. Here, as we've seen that SEBI, there has to be a registration with SEBI and MCA, and similarly with time, as company will continue to exist, there are certain compliances that it needs to abide by. These compliances are with regard to the advisory or guidelines that are put up by SEBI or MCA. So these regulatory bodies play a key role in functioning of a company. They also, what they do, being part of the corporate governance framework, these regulatory, in one manner or the other, ensure that there is transparency with regard to the functioning of the company. There is high level of accountability by the company officials, and there is a fair practice of its functioning because the compliances are time bound. So the government or the regulatory body can also take into account of their functionings. All right. Next, what it also does is it also monitors and regulates what all activities it's eventually undertaking with regard to its mergers, acquisitions, or corporate restructuring. In case it's making more subsidiaries, then all of those information is collated by these regulatory bodies, and they are maintained in a format that we could see that how a company has evolved over the years. Okay, this in a manner would enforce the legal provisions which are existing within different laws of our country, and would also have some implication in case there is non-compliance. Another set of corporate governance that fall upon when a company is functioning is that corporate governance is when there are regulatory bodies that have come in play and they're actually monitoring the conducts of company. So why exactly then it becomes important to look into how the companies are functioning? It is important so that because a company we've seen is formed by group of people. So it's not important that, all of them will be given equal rights or equal right or maybe benefit when it comes to how much turnover the company is getting. Okay. So then the corporate governance comes in play, because what it does is it's actually protecting the right of the shareholders, their interest. It's also making sure that there are, as we've seen that why the regulatory bodies are important. Now we are seeing that what are the practices. So here also we've seen that transparency and accountability is paramount. All right. We've constituted a company, the compliances are adhered. So that proves that definitely a company is doing the right thing, which it should, right? Next thing, it will look into what is the board composition, what are the, how many independent directors are there, what are the remuneration policies that the company has, and would also try to balance out the interest that the shareholders are having and give a sustainability approach to the business, which becomes important in present times, considering, the companies are not having a very sustainable approach towards their function. So now the next question that came to my mind while I was actually preparing for this session was that, okay, corporate governance is there, but how can we actually expand or grow within the domain with time? So to answer that question, I think it's very important to look into the global scenarios here, global corporate scenario, if I put it right, because herein the opportunities come in play, and here where we get to know that how we can enter within a domain and what are the different avenues that one can explore. So there are different investments that are being given by the country itself, that may be state owned or maybe at country levels. And there are other business opportunities, like, you may have business incubators, or you may have, like we have Made in India. So these are the domains wherein the government itself is promoting that companies should be formulated, and there should be certain level of local production that should be done on behalf of the country people, and that would eventually be backed by the investment that the country itself is providing. So by virtue of which we see that the investments are rising within the domain, and it's also promoted that domestic entrepreneurs should come up. And because there are such diverse opportunities within our country that may be technology driven or manufacturing driven, it becomes, and it scopes out for individuals, expansion of their corporate domain with regard to economic sustenance or with regard to generating employability. So in one way or the other, it becomes a win-win situation once, a company is formulated, or there are different opportunities that comes in play with regard to a company. All right. Next is, Digital India, Make in India. These are different initiatives that the government is undertaking to foster entrepreneurship, to ensure that there is a heightened level of domestic manufacturers within the country. So these are some landscape that exists presently in our country. Now, talking about how has MNC cooperation involved in the domain. As you see, different this discussion becomes important is that we've known that company is formed. We've known that there is a subject called company law and corporate law that talks about or gives us the nitty-gritties of its formation, and what extent of liabilities or rights it may provide. So next is also important that can we also explore this domain, or whether it's only limited to joining a law firm or exploring the corporate law venues within the Indian periphery. So that's why I've tried to also highlight what is the company landscape within our country, and how is the government supporting it, and how is the MNC culture also expanding. So this gives us one idea that yes, there are, other than the core legal domain, there are also other avenues that we can explore, because these MNC do have the legal departments that each of us with our corporate legal knowledge can explore into entering. Okay. So to give you a idea about how is the expansion of MNCs growing in India, we see that the foreign direct investments are rising, because of which different MNCs are entering within the market. So what they're doing is they're expanding the market, and they are in need of skilled workforce. Okay. Uh, Skilled workforce that they have, these people will hold a certain level of expertise, all right, and this will eventually lead to more collaboration and joint ventures that would involve global enterprises, and to an extent may also giving an individual that level of exposure that they can explore within the corporation different global countries as well. Okay, different countries, I mean, as well. So this culture has to an extent also awakened our country about ethical nuances, about standard business functioning processes. So this to an extent gives us an idea that yes, MNCs or other corporate domains are existent within our country, and it's not important for us to just only focus on the law firm. There are also other avenues with our given expertise, our given knowledge. We can also go in that domain. So now I'm trying to slowly bring you to our next and main agenda of today, that is how can we have a career in the corporate domain. Okay, so before jumping on directly within the topic, I wanted you to understand what is the national landscape with regard to formation of a company, how are MNCs entering in the market. Now let's focus on what are the different domains that exist within the corporate sector in which you as a student can enter. Okay, so here what I've tried to focus upon is I've tried to, so every time Akshay would reach out, he would want to do a masterclass about careers here, careers there. But it's also important for us to focus on, right when we are in the college, what subjects can we touch upon that would eventually help us to ease the process of entering within the corporate domain. All right. So to make this a masterclass, I wanted to focus primarily upon the areas exactly that you touch upon, that it becomes easier for you to explore the sector better or to gain quicker and better benefits. So prime domains within the corporate sector that one can explore are, if you are into the intellectual property domain. Okay, IPRs are such that not only legal firms but other corporates also want to explore what all IPR, intellectual right for laws fall upon them, how many they wish to dissuade. So all those nuances, if you are aware of, can be an asset for you if you wish to enter within the corporate sector domain. Next is evolving. Sandball speed is the technology. So having an idea about what are technology law, and you have an understanding with regard to different technology, and then what are the legal implications on these technology would definitely give you upper hand once you try to enter the corporate domain. Next is a very core domain, that is the present and the future. Once we talk about the environmental and the sustainability laws in the sector, ESG is the future. If you are reading a lot, if you are exploring a lot about ESG within your time in the college, it becomes easier for you to be wary of once you enter the sector, because once you start off your career, you've already had that level of understanding of clarity about the environment or the need for sustainability. So hence you become an asset to the company or the domain itself. So this is also a key subject that you should be mindful of during legal education. Now, moving on to the next leg, that is what are the key skills and competencies that you would require if you wish to success in the corporate law domain. Please, be mindful that these are not exhaustive list of skills and competencies. In my experience of, so many years, I've seen that these are the primarily skills that helps you and makes the path easier. So it's important that you should hold a certain level of understanding about certain aspect that we discussed. So this will make your progress quicker. So let's just begin with it. Knowledge and analytical skill. It's very important that you should be thorough with the subject. Whatever domain you want to enter into, you should be very, very thorough with the laws per se. You should be analytical in your skills. Don't just say yes to everything. Question things. If you're not able to understand anything, go deeper, read more. So, okay. So that would to an extent help you with regard to, your understanding of the subject. Okay. Next is communication and negotiation skills. These are, right when you're in the college, it's important that you participate in different debate competitions and different moot court competitions that help you sharpen your communication and negotiation skills. So you're actually able to, do better once you enter the domain. You have certain level of confidence when you're talking or when you are, uh, practicing right when you enter the corporate sector. So next is business acumen, commercial awareness. Be aware. So during this session, I did talk about what is going on nationally. Are there MNCs functioning in the domain or not? Are there venues or places not wherein, you can explore other job opportunities? So yes, it's important that you should have that level of understanding what is happening in the market. Where all opportunities can you explore? So it's important that you hold that level of acumen and awareness, and it will help you, get started in your journey as soon as possible. Next is ethical and professional conduct. This goes beyond saying you should be very professional. You should maintain this level of confidentiality, given that you're also an advocate and then you're in a corporate domain, which has a lot of competitive landscape. So it's very important for you to ensure that there are confidentiality, there is level of integrity that you uphold. Beyond the legal ethics that we have, all of us have, this is another aspect that you should be mindful of. Now talking about how can you enter early or you can target better firms. You have to perform better once you're in your undergrad. It is very, very, very important that right when you're in your college, you have to acquire certain level of critical thinking, certain level of writing and communication skills. So once you have that hold or that level of basics clear, it becomes easier to sharpen them once you enter the market. Next is you have to try and do better in the law school, and not just within the education, that you've gained certain level of skills, you're scoring well. It's also important that you participate in extracurricular activities that are somewhere or the other related to your ultimate objective. Even if that being corporate, entering the corporate domain, you should be active within the courses or internship that the other opportunity that you come across. Now certificates and continuing education that reflects that you should try to enhance your knowledge. You should try to engage in practical aspects by doing internships, or taking up some sessions with your professor themselves. In case you have some doubts, you should be vocal about it, and if you have further question, you should go and reach out to people, and just be very thorough with your understanding of any topic that is of your choice. Seek internship, as I've been saying, that whatever area you decide to go further in, you should make sure that you seek internships there, hold certain level of understanding what is the layers of position that exist. And by virtue of these internship, to an extent, you will have a network, or you would have that level of opportunities, so that you can explore in future, not just the first job that you land in further also furtherance, while you're within the job, you require any support or some clarity on any issue, you have the level of network that can help you. Or if you wish to switch, you can also explore other opportunities. There are different legal, publications and newsletters. Do sign up for them. They give you legal bites about everyday affairs. One that tops my mind is Bar and Bench and Live Law. Have access to them. They will give you a first-hand understanding about the everyday activity. So you're updated on your own. By the time you enter the market, you have certain level of understanding what went on in the past. So also try to attend legal networking event and conferences, similar as we had this session today. Session like these will give you an understanding, or other events and conferences. They give you a, practical understanding from the people who are within the domain to the do's and don'ts that you can inculcate within yourselves at the stage that you are at. So, the journey become easier for you. Now, you can also join in professional organization and association. These will help you give a exposure, maybe in form of internships or something that's freelance. So try to engage in all those. That will give you an level of exposure. Now, okay, so this is what you can do once you are willing to enter within the domain, the skills that you can sharpen upon. Now we talk about what are the qualification that is per se necessary. You've had your level of skills and expertise, but right when you have to enter for the job, what right away is the star element that lands you within the job? Here, your undergraduate degree is primary. If you wish to explore the legal domain, your law degree will be an asset for you, and hence you can go directly within the domain. Whatever internships or expertise you've had while your association with other bodies, this will help you. This will be an asset for you. Next is specialization in corporate law. Let's say you've done any coursework from Coursera or Udemy, which makes you gives you a understanding or specializes you in different domains of corporate law, be it merger, acquisition, corporate governance, contract law, etc. So all of that will give you an upper hand to enter, to be selected once you're appearing for a job. Okay. Now, different career opportunities. Moving to the last leg. So what are the different career opportunities that one may have once they are trying to enter the market? So primarily, you can become a lawyer within a corporate law firm. Here, your legal degree will be an asset because the requirement is for a law. So once you have that level of qualifications, it becomes easier for you to land in a corporate law jobs. Next is area of expertise. If let's say you hold an expertise in commercial laws, and there are practices that are targeted on certain aspects like arbitration, and you are also an expert, or you've done certain level of education or internship in the arbitration domain, it becomes easier for you to enter the market. Now, next is that you can also explore certain skill set. As we've already discussed, you should be problem solving. You should have certain negotiation skills. There should be a certain level of acumen that should exist, that you should be little, multitasking, or you should be ready to explore the opportunities. Now, a second domain that you can, a career that you can also explore is when you try to be an in-house counsel. Different firms have certain lawyers that within them, and they do the compliance activity within the company. So if you wish, you can also explore those avenues. Next is government and regulatory bodies. Different government and regulatory bodies have legal positions, and you can also explore those avenues. You can either be a legal advisor, or you can be a regulatory professional. You can also be a policy analyst or a researcher, like I am, within the domain regulatory practices, corporate, and then you can do that within corporate sector itself. So these are the different avenues that you can explore. You can also try and get into the academic side of it, wherein if you wish to be a teacher in corporate law, you can also, explore those avenues. And for that, you need to be thorough. You need to have certain level of educational qualification, because there are certain eligibility criteria that are necessary to enter within academia, not just corporate law, but in academia altogether. So hold those expertise, have those qualification, and then you can also explore the academic areas. So on that end, I think we are right on time. I'll just wind up, and thank you so much. So if anyone has any question, we can take them in another 5 minutes. Thank you.